Story 1. I wish I had started journaling earlier. Not the Dear Diary kind. No offense if that is your vibe, but just brain-dumping thoughts, sorting through my mess of ideas, and tracking how I have grown. It would have saved me so much overthinking. Story 2. Exercise is so hard. It's easy to give up when you're out of shape and feel awful. I know if I stick with it, it should get easier, but I really hate it. Story 3. I wish I had started learning about mental health and coping skills earlier. Could have saved me so much grief. Story 4. Pilates. I am getting ripped at 50, but I wish I had been ripped at 40 because I would have been happier. Story 5. I am learning coping skills. I turn 26 soon, and I have very few healthy coping mechanisms. I have been an alcoholic for years at this point, and every time I manage to quit drinking, I just get so much worse. Story 6. Calling it quits. I wasted my 30s on a dead marriage because quitting felt like failure. I should have been a quitter at 28, not a fighter. Story 7. Loving myself more than caring for others, even my family and friends. Story 8. In high school, a friend and I spent every day working on a novel. When school let out, we took it to the English teacher we had the previous year. She read it and told us that Stephen King had just published a new book with an identical storyline. I was so frustrated that I did not write again until I was 40. I have 10 published works and wish I had started sooner. I still hate Stephen King. Story 9. Learning Chinese. Why the hell did my parents put me in recorder classes? I don't know, but so far it hasn't been useful in life. Story 10. Caring less about inconsequential things reduced the stress and energy I wasted. Story 11. Taking care of my health, both physical and mental, is important. The earlier you start, the more it pays off, and I wish I'd realized that sooner. Story 12. My job. If I had started earlier, I would be paid so much more. Story 13. Therapy led to my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnosis at 40. It would have been nice to know about my diagnosis during childhood. Story 14. I was broke and waited until my mid to late 20s to lose 200 pounds. As a result, I have permanent loose skin. Story 15. Learn about compound interest and why it is crucial to start saving early, no matter how small the amount. Also contribute to your 401k retirement plan to receive the employer match. Story 16. Wegovy has changed my life more than anything else. I previously paid for a nutritionist and for more than a year of personal training. Story 17. Sobriety. Drugs and alcohol are an absolute waste of money, time, energy, and life. Story 18. Probably a controversial answer, but 3. 4. Methylenedioxymethamphetamine, MDMA. I didn't try it until my mid-30s despite years of binge drinking at concerts and festivals. I believed all the stigma about it. It turned out to be one of the most meaningful moments of my life, and I pretty much stopped drinking immediately after trying it once because drinking felt stupid in comparison. I had perfect recall of the concert or festival, a super clear headspace that made it easy to follow conversations and know where I was, and I felt love, connection, beauty, and a sense that every person on earth has meaning. It is really hard to die from MDMA. It is not chemically addictive, and if tested and dosed properly and spaced out to no more than about 4 times a year, it is far better for your body than alcohol, which is easier to die from, is chemically addictive for many, and wrecks your body. As a teenager, I was told it makes holes in your brain and that people die from it all the time. I honestly believe that with proper dosing and testing, it is substantially safer for you than alcohol. Concerts and festivals were my happy place, and I realized I was making them worse with beer, not better. With MDMA and later lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, and psilocybin mushrooms, everything I loved about them was turned up to infinity. I was floored to find out how safe these substances were in comparison. LSD and psilocybin mushrooms cannot kill you, are not physically addictive, and have almost no lasting physical effects on your body. Do not get me started on how they can be used to treat mental health disorders. MDMA has shown strong effectiveness for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, in therapeutic settings. Ketamine can rapidly reduce depressive symptoms in many users in therapeutic settings. Even Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and other institutions acknowledge this. Then I learned it was used legally in the 1970s and 1980s by marriage counselors in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the government reacted by making it illegal when it started being sold in clubs and never revisited the decision. It made me realize that alcohol is a horrible drug that we only use because it is so normalized and accepted in society, and that some of the drugs we stigmatize are more like little kittens than tigers. I used to drink all the time and couldn't see a life without alcohol. Story 19. Caring about starting a relationship when there are a lot of people of similar age around can be difficult. It is harder once you are out of school. Story 20. I used a wheelchair. I went from being very outdoorsy to being homebound for years because of internalized ableism and pride. I could have been out and about the whole time if I had not been convinced by society that only paraplegics need wheelchairs and if I had not been afraid of being judged lazy. Those years were so stupid. Story 21. Working out improved not only my mental health but also my physical health. Story 22. I received news last year that I have fewer than 5 years to live. Even though life is hard and sometimes quite sad, I feel liberated. I do what I want and enjoy the joys that life gives me. Story 23. I wish I had gotten a job earlier. I foolishly decided I did not need one while I was studying for my postgraduate degree and ended up with a couple of years of serious financial difficulties. Ideally, I should have gotten a job as soon as I turned 18, which I could have done alongside college and during my undergraduate and postgraduate studies. Story 24. I have a healthy, happy daughter. I would love another, but I probably will not now that I am 40. I am very thankful. Story 25. Exercising and eating right, taking care of my skin and hair, investing in clothes that fit. God, all this stuff I figured out after college. Better late than never, I guess. Story 26. My husband and I knew we wanted children, but we kept putting it off for superficial reasons. Turned out we had infertility. Now I wish we had started earlier so we would have had a better chance and more time to start a family. Story 27. Contribute to a 401k retirement plan as soon as you start working. Also fund a Roth individual retirement account in the early years when you are in a lower tax bracket. Story 28. Working out. I played a lot of video games when I was younger, and I somewhat regret it. Story 29. Collecting vinyl records because they were much cheaper to buy a decade or more ago. Story 30. Going out places. I have plenty of fuel left in the tank, as my username suggests, but even attending open mics is a good way to meet people of all kinds and your life will be richer for it. You do not even have to go on stage. I landed a 10-minute scratch performance out of nowhere, and now I just need an idea. It is bold, but I think I can do it, and if it succeeds with an audience, it could open the door to a full play. Story 31. I started working at 30. I got a decent job by lying and received a promotion after 8 months. 6 months ago, I took a new job that is much better, but I still feel like nothing is enough. Even though I can save a good amount of money, it never feels like enough because people my age have been working for 10 years and have savings sufficient to buy an apartment or a car. I feel like I'm 24. I even look that young, but I still feel the weight of falling behind. Story 32. Saving for retirement because I do not want to work forever. Story 33. I would have scolded my teenage self for not flossing when it could have prevented problems. Story 34. Exercise. I spent the entirety of my 20s being unhealthy. I look and feel better in my 30s. Story 35. I wish I had started playing Warhammer around the 8th edition or when Age of Sigmar came out. Story 36. I am working on discernment, but I gave people too many chances when they did not deserve such respect. Story 37. I am evaluating who belongs in my inner circle and not giving access to my private life to people who don't deserve it. Story 38. I have spent nearly a decade working remotely as a corporate slave, and nothing significant has happened in my life. Story 39. I focused on good guitar technique and learned how and why my favorite players chose the notes and phrases that moved me. I only cleaned things up 4 years ago instead of 40 years ago, and I could have had a lot more fun in the meantime. I still loved playing the whole time, and at least I figured it out eventually. Story 40. I wish I had started saving and investing earlier. It would have saved me a lot of stress. Learning to code earlier would have opened up many more opportunities. Story 41. Invest not only money but also time in skills and relationships. Both grow with patience. Story 42. Nightcore on YouTube refers to taking a song and increasing the speed by 10 to 20%. This makes most tracks feel more energetic, but it also raises the pitch. I did this in the early 2000s and assumed it was just me being a weird little outcast. A decade later, it had become a major subgenre. I tried uploading my versions but received no views. It's largely dead now because copyright detection technology caught up, but for about a decade one could upload any Nightcore track with a random anime image and get millions of views from anime fans and gamers, especially after autoplay was introduced. It generated easy advertising revenue, and top uploaders earned substantial income because the algorithm kept favoring their channels. Story 43. Meditation and breathwork have been game changers for me. Story 44. Photography is something I wish I had taken up earlier. Capturing moments, moods, and stories teaches you to see life differently. The earlier you start, the more memories you get to hold on to forever. Story 45. Programming is so tough to understand. Story 46. I am healing myself and changing for the better. I am grinding hard. Story 47. Tennis. I am 38 years old. I started a year ago. I should have started 30 years earlier. Laughing out loud. Story 48. I exercise specifically by backpacking. I started later in life, and now the joints are not as cooperative. Story 49. I wish I had started reading more books earlier. Not just for knowledge, but because it changes how you think, helps you understand people better, and gives you ideas you would never have come across otherwise. It feels like I could have been years ahead if I had picked up the habit sooner. Story 50. Reading for fun became a chore because school required a set number of books from a specific list. Story 51. I am investing outside the United States, so my strategy is dividend investing in companies with a proven record of at least 20 years of paying dividends. I picked from the top 10, and after a year I earned about 15% return with no unrealized losses. I started in 2024 and wish I had begun 5 years earlier. The 4 years it could have compounded during my university period would have been great, but it is still better to have learned this sooner rather than later. Story 52. Investing. I've only been investing about $150 per pay period into a Roth account for a couple of years, and it is doing very well. I regret not starting more than 20 years ago. Even $50 a month would have made a huge difference over that time. It really does matter. Starting much earlier might be the difference between asking, am I going to have enough for retirement? And actually achieving financial independence, retire early in my mid to late 50s, perhaps even sooner. Story 53. I wish I had started taking care of myself before caring for others. Story 54. I learned that diets and restrictions eventually cause me to overeat. Now I'm learning to eat intuitively without rules. It's the hardest diet I've ever done. Story 55. I learned to drive late. I didn't know how until I was 27. I'm 28 now, and it was no one's fault. On top of that, I had to teach myself. Story 56. Saving for retirement. The power of compound interest is incredible. Story 57. It's just life. I was kind of burned out after high school for a few years. I spent far too much time waiting tables. Then I moved in with my buddy, met my wife, got a decent job, and now we own a house. Story 58. I wish I had known that the world is driven by money. If I want something, I will most likely need money to obtain it. If only I had known earlier, I would not have saved up to buy a Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1992. Instead, I would have quit school, gotten a job, and saved that money. I would have been frugal and avoided spending on parties so I could start investing in land or a house early and perhaps own property by my early 20s. Then I could have sold it in my early 30s for 4 times what I paid, retired, and lived off my modest wealth. Story 59. I started learning to code at 25 and wish I had started at 15. I could have built so many cool things by now instead of wondering what if every day. Story 60. Menopause. I am tired of having periods, and I do not expect anyone to want to get me pregnant. Story 61. Investing. Going to therapy. Going to the gym. Believing in myself. Story 62. I wish I had started focusing on building multiple income streams earlier. For a long time, I relied on a single source of income, which felt safe at the time but proved risky. Over the years, I learned how important it is to diversify through investing, side hustles, or learning new skills. If I had started sooner, I would have had more financial stability and freedom today. That lesson taught me not to wait for the perfect time, because there rarely is one. This is not just my story. It is the story of millions of people who settle into a comfort zone after finding a reliable source of income. Based on my 13 years of experience in the industry, I can tell you that having multiple income streams is extremely important. Story 63. I wish I had started taking my sleep more seriously earlier. I used to power through late nights thinking I was being productive, but now I realize how much it affects everything. Story 64. I care about being here and my mental and physical health. Story 65. I totally feel that. I wish I had started learning a new language earlier. It would have been so useful. Story 66. For me, it is learning basic do-it-yourself home repair skills. I spent my 20s completely baffled by anything that did not involve turning it off and on again. Now, every time I have to pay a professional for something that ends up being a 10-minute fix, a little part of my soul weeps for my past self. Story 67. I wish my parents had started teaching me foreign languages, music, and other skills at a younger age, so I would have had a foundation to support me later in life. Story 68. Investing and watching compound interest work its magic is like free money I missed out on. Story 69. Taking care of my health is much easier than repairing it later. Story 70. I wish I had realized how unimportant everything is and how little value it ultimately has. It would have tempered me and shown me that things would have been all right in the end. Story 71. I wish I had started volunteering much earlier. It gave me the routine I needed to be stable. Story 72. The only thing I wish I had started earlier was my YouTube channel. I would already be monetized by now. Story 73. I wish I had started saving earlier. When I started my first job, I had no children, no partner, and no commitments. I bought what I wanted, ate what I wanted, and drank all the time. I never planned for the future because, to be honest, I did not imagine having one. Now I have a child and a fiancé, and I wish I had savings. It would not solve all my problems, but if I had saved, it would have made things easier. Story 74. I actually wish I had killed myself those years ago when I had the strength and commitment to do it. Life has only gotten worse for me since, but now there are a lot more kids in the picture who do love me, and I cannot do that to them. I am really sorry you are feeling this way. Are you safe right now? If you are in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number or go to the nearest emergency department. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local crisis line or emergency services. Consider reaching out to someone you trust or a mental health professional. If you want, I can help you find resources or talk through next steps. Story 75. I wish I had started learning French earlier. I live in France now and cannot communicate with locals. I understand much of what they say, but I cannot reply in French. Story 76. Therapy would have saved me years of arguing with myself in the shower. Story 77. Investing. I came from a poor background. Some family members invested once but were cheated by a broker, so they advised me never to invest. A family friend who is successful in investing said there was no point unless I had a few £1,000s to start. I went years without investing until I decided something was better than nothing. Each month, when I consider a non-essential purchase, for example a bottle of wine that costs £6, I ask whether I really want it. If I decide not to buy it, I transfer that amount to my savings account and at the end of the month move it into my investments. It has been growing for 2 years, and I am now seeing a noticeable increase in returns. I wish I had started at 16 when I first mentioned the idea to the family friend who discouraged me. 16 years of compounding could have built significant wealth from almost nothing. Story 78. I joined a better insurance brokerage. When I first started, I saw red flags. Now the annual enrollment period is nearly here, and I am stuck. Story 79. I really enjoy surfing, but if I had started earlier when I was a little rubber person, I would have better flexibility. Story 80. I wish I had started investing earlier. No particular reason. Story 81. My gender transition has led me to live a joyless life of repression out of fear of being seen as weird and becoming a shut-in to avoid even the possibility of harassment. This has harmed my ability to live as myself and to experience the world. I am great at gaming, though. Story 82. Saving money and investing. I never knew life would get so expensive. That's me, single with no kids. Story 83. I wish I had started doing YouTube earlier. I probably would have made a decent living or been able to pay for college. Story 84. I used to just go to work and classes, then come home, but I am trying to change that. Story 85. Gaming with my wife has brought us so much closer and given us something to do as a couple almost every night. Story 86. Autism assessment. I had the opportunity nearly 20 years ago during my first psychiatric hospital admission, but there were a lot of other things going on in my head and my life, so the assessment never happened. This year, I finally referred myself and am now on a waiting list that is several years long. So the likelihood of being diagnosed before I am 45 is slim. I am 42 now. I could have a private assessment, but that would cost nearly £3,000, and there is no guarantee that the National Health Service will accept a private autism diagnosis or will not continue to view my difficulties as solely a mental health issue such as borderline personality disorder. I am not denying the personality disorder diagnosis, but there are many markers that would fit an autism diagnosis better. It is possible to have both autism and borderline personality disorder, and many autistic women are misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder because they can present similar behaviors. Story 87. I started investing at 14, but I wish I had asked my parents a bit earlier. Story 88. College, because I could have started working in my chosen field sooner and made more money. Story 89. I am running, although I guess it's not that good for the joints. I wish I were doing half marathons by now. Story 90. Hitting the books and upskilling. Gaining experience and degrees. I foolishly followed my grandfather's advice and thought that working menial jobs would pay off. Didn't. Story 91. I am getting rid of friends who only get in touch when they want something. I am a people pleaser. My other half is not and taught me not to be a doormat. Story 92. I could have had dozens of kids by now. I'm trying to make up for lost time, but my wife is being a huge baby about it. Story 93. I am naturally quite decent at mixed martial arts, but starting at 28 means I have nowhere to take it. Story 94. I comment on AskReddit threads. I have so much wisdom to offer. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.